A gloomy castle rises above the ground, shrouded in the veil of night and silent anticipation. In the depths of the hall, where a solemn silence reigns, the Lord addresses the one who stands at the foot of the throne, recalling their last meeting half a century ago. Lord reproaches the guest, implying that Rai came only at the call, to which he calmly remarks about the fleeting passage of time. The Overlord announces the true reason for the call. He needs a favor, but Ray's gaze remains inscrutable. At this moment, Frankenstein appears. Coughing, he respectfully hints to the Lord that he himself must reveal the essence of the matter. Lord gets to the main topic by asking Ray a question about the mysterious tears of God, which he doesn't answer right away. The Lord shares an ancient legend about divine tears capable of granting unprecedented strength or immortality, confirming that rumors of the artifact have reached him. Ray listens silently, and Lord continues, pointing out that folk traditions often diverge from the truth. Frankenstein interrupts, claiming that this time everything is different. The location of the artifact is known, and there is evidence of its miraculous power. Lord, giving the order with force, instructs Ray to investigate everything about the god's tears, emphasizing that only he is capable of handling this task. Ray finishes his sentence, and Frankenstein expresses his bewilderment at what Lord said. Ray reluctantly agrees because Lord skillfully manipulates, citing the busyness of the clan heads. As he leaves, Rai hears the Lord's parting words, urging him to begin the task immediately. Ray's figure disappears into the distance, leaving Frankenstein lost in thought. Lord grins with satisfaction, knowing that Ray will never refuse his request. Lord laughs loudly, confident in his power, but Frankenstein, despite this, feels worried about Ray. Frankenstein suddenly realizes that Lord lied to Ray, but tries to convince himself that it is a trifle, not worthy of attention. The Lord himself confirms that he is not indifferent to this, leaving the motives for the deception unclear. Frankenstein demands an explanation, to which Lord cryptically replies that he is troubled by something that happened 50 years ago, recalling his last meeting with Ray. But the next day, when Frankenstein himself came to Ray, he was no longer at home. Frankenstein, having come to Ray, discovered his absence and, deciding that he had simply gone out for a walk, waited almost the whole day, but Ray never returned. Such a long absence was completely out of character for Ray, and an uneasy uncertainty hung in the air. One of his subordinates, without waiting for Frankenstein to finish his story, met Ray on the way back, not far from his house. But Ray was acting strangely, looking around as if he had lost something or someone in familiar places. He said that he was returning home after meeting with the Lord, and there was not a shadow of embarrassment in his words. But this was impossible, because Frankenstein himself visited Lord only the next day, which meant that Ray had already been absent for 2 days. Was he looking around when you found him? Came the worried question, and a spark of suspicion lit up Frankenstein's eyes. Yes, that was exactly what they thought, something that none of them could comprehend. The great Cadiz Atrama de Raziel lost his way, got lost just a few steps from his own home. These words pierced the Lord like icy shards, breaking his heart and faith in the unshakable. After all, Ray's house was very close, just 2 steps from the place where he was met. And it wasn't Ray's first time in these places. He knew them thoroughly, which made what happened even more sinister. Many years later, when the echoes of those events had almost died down, a new day arrived, full of new secrets. A dormant volcano could be seen in the distance, and every breath of the earth seemed deep, foreshadowing something grandiose. In a tranquil forest, where only the singing of birds broke the silence, a lone figure appeared, radiating a mysterious energy. Thin fingers, almost touching the trunk of an old tree, seemed to listen to the pulse of the forest, sensing its life and hidden threats. The sun's rays pierced the treetops, but even the bright light could not hide the wariness in the red eyes that concealed ancient power. A sudden cry broke the silence. "There's someone here!" And the air filled with tension as the warriors prepared for battle. Raising their shields and swords, they emerged from the thicket, their gazes fixed on Ray, who stood with his back to him, motionless. Ray turned slowly, his calm face meeting their resolve, his scarlet eyes filled with an ancient, unflappable power. Ral, not wanting to ignore the stranger, demanded an explanation while his companions voiced their concerns, seeing in the stranger only a potential threat. But before their thoughts could reach an end, the young companion, Uni, ran forward with a scream, trying to stop the mysterious man. Ral tried to calm her impulse, pointing out the defenselessness of Ray, who did not even have a weapon and who did not show aggression. However, this only strengthened Ral's suspicions. The complete lack of weapons on the part of the stranger in such dangerous lands seemed unnatural. His scarlet eyes showed deep anxiety, because at any moment a monster or a wild animal could jump out of the thicket and the stranger stood completely defenseless. In response to their confusion, only Ray's scarlet eyes remained serene, reflecting a bottomless ancient mystery. Suddenly, UNI, lost in thought, remembered the group of dead people found recently, and she was overcome by a premonition that Ray might be the last of them. The image of the dead flashed before her mind's eye, and the girl assumed that the stranger could have fallen behind or been the only one who got here alive. "The truth will only be revealed when he speaks," said Rael, calling on Ray to break the silence and clarify the situation. But in response, Rey only uttered something inarticulate, words that did not belong to any language known to them. The sounds of alien speech, like the rustling of unknown leaves, only increased the group's bewilderment, making them feel even more lost. Rael, embarrassed, admitted that he had never heard such a dialect before and concluded that the stranger was obviously not a local. An argument arose between the companions. Should they leave him in the wilderness, despite his defenselessness, or bring him to the village, which seemed no less risky? A silent exchange of glances, full of unspoken questions, passed between Rael and Wei like an echo of unresolved dilemmas. Finally, Rael made a firm decision. They would take him with them, because abandoning a defenseless man in these lands would be unworthy. He reminded his companions of their duty to protect not only their own, but anyone in trouble, regardless of their background. One of the companions, however, expressed concern that this decision would provoke the wrath of a certain Kar, who was already looking for a reason to reproach. Rael, placing his hand on his subordinate's shoulder, confidently assured him that he would cope with the possible consequences and settle everything himself. With a slight grin, he added that Kar was unlikely to develop warm feelings for him, regardless of their actions, so there was no need to worry. But before they could move, UNI, impatiently, rushed towards Ray again, as if assuring herself and everyone around her that everything would be all right. His thoughts revolved around UNI, whose childish intuition was more reliable than any adult calculations. If she didn't sense a threat, then there probably wasn't one. Little UNI, as if sensing the hesitation, hurriedly approached Wei, barely audibly muttering an apology. One of Rael's companions, seeing their indecision, warned them of the lurking danger and again suggested that they go together. Without waiting for an answer, UNI trustingly tugged Ray's sleeve, insisting that he come with them. For a moment, something vague flashed in Ray's scarlet eyes before he looked down at the small, determined UNI. Rael's group watched this scene with bated interest and slight bewilderment. Finally, the chief among them, a man with a stern gaze, sharply reminded his subordinates of the need to be on guard because time is running out. The path ran through dense thickets, winding along a narrow trail, as if hiding unknown secrets in its depths. An ancient, wise snake, coiled around a branch like a guardian of the forest, calmly gazed upon this world. The two groups moved along the forest road, each step echoing in the silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves. Suddenly, Wei stopped, and UNI looked up at him questioningly, while Rael listened warily to something hidden from ordinary eyes. Rael studied Ray intently, his mind frantically trying to determine the stranger's status from his attire and demeanor. UNI, not understanding, turned to Ray again, asking the reason for his sudden stop. The sky above their heads remained serene, but a premonition of change was already in the air. It was dangerous to stay here. Suddenly, the ground shook, cracking under the powerful impact, and a gigantic wave of power erupted from the depths, causing UNI to freeze in fear. Rael, instantly assessing the danger, loudly ordered everyone to retreat, drawing his blade, shining with light. The ground shook with the weight as the gigantic, monstrous paw struck it with a deafening roar. From the clouds of dust and destruction he appeared, a huge, bestial creature with a menacing roar. The warriors recoiled in horror, their screams drowned out by the roar of the monster as it moved inexorably forward, crushing everything in its path. The ominous gleam in his eye foreshadowed only one thing: the awakening of unimaginable power. Rael, his red eyes blazing with determination, rushed towards the monster, swinging his sword. The ground shook under the blow of his colossal paw, scattering stones and dust around. "I'll take care of the monster," Rael exclaimed, "and you protect the young lady and the stranger." The monster's thunderous roar echoed through the wooded hills, striking terror into hearts. With agility that only hinted at his true strength, Rael dodged the deadly blow, his sword flashing with light. The sharp blade only slightly scratched the monster's incredibly dense flesh, leaving a light scratch on Rael's face. The monster roared in response, and Rael was thrown back by the powerful shockwave, but he did not give up. "Damn it, my attacks are barely effective," flashed through his thoughts. "I've never met an opponent with such strength and speed." "Don't worry, he'll defeat this monster," the child said confidently, addressing the imperturbable Rai. Rai's red eyes showed deep thought as the little companion prayed for salvation. Without wasting a second, Rael entered the fight again, but every move he made was met with a furious response from the beast. With unimaginable ease, the monster tore a huge tree from the ground, turning it into a deadly weapon. It brought the barrel down on Rael, who barely managed to dodge the crushing blow that shook the air. In an instant, Rael barely avoided the fatal blow, a steely look flashing in his eyes. Skillfully maneuvering around the giant, Rael sought out weak spots, never ceasing to attack. The beast let out another deafening roar, expressing its rage and frantic power. The powerful blow sent Rael flying backwards, sending him skidding across the ground. However, having regained his balance, he immediately jumped to the side while the monster continued its destructive path. The terrified warriors and young companion watched in horror as Rael was forced to retreat. The monster was approaching inexorably, and the warriors, clutching their weapons, prepared for a desperate fight. Faced with the beast, the warriors hold their formation, knowing that retreat would doom the young companion and the stranger to certain death, and Rael bitterly realizes that even his speed cannot stop the monster's onslaught. The earth trembles under the weight of the monster, its tread shakes the world, and next to it, Ray, with grim determination, protects the one next to him. A frightened boy clings to someone else's hand, seeking protection, and something ancient and frighteningly powerful flashes in Ray's eyes. The beast's roar pierces the air, and its inexorable tread echoes across the land, bringing the inevitable closer. It's too late to retreat. Every warrior knows he is doomed to stand at least a moment to give others a chance. The monster's vicious roar is deafening. Its mouth opens in a deadly attack, and despair grips the young heart. Suddenly, a crimson light illuminates Ray's eyes, awakening hidden power. And at that very moment, the beast, swinging to strike, freezes in the air, as if stopped by an invisible force. A sharp blade plunges into the monster's neck, and a fountain of scarlet blood stains the ground. One of the warriors, looking out from behind his shield, sees with surprise the beast's death throes. The monster's mighty body collapses to the ground, raising clouds of dust, and the shocked warriors cannot believe their eyes. Rael stands over the fallen beast, his sword in his hand, and in his eyes is the cold determination of a winner. The monster is defeated, its last breaths dying away in the dust. Jubilation fills the warriors. They greet Rael as a savior, and their cries of "Hurrah!" echo throughout the valley. Rael exchanges words with the warriors, reflecting on the beast's strange moment of confusion, realizing that it saved their lives. The group moves on, leaving the battle behind, and the warriors discuss the monster's proximity to the village, thanking the gods for saving them. Rael continues to be tormented by the question of the monster's sudden stop, not noticing Ray's intense gaze, who seemed to know the answers. Rael and his companion discuss the stranger and his vulnerability, but Ray's words reveal an undisguised contempt for such ignorance of the world. The warriors playfully bicker, boasting to each other, while the young man laughs loudly and Ray only watches, maintaining his silence. Suddenly, Ray's sharp voice interrupts their chatter, and in the background is the motionless body of the beast, a reminder of the recent danger. Their fighting spirit was quickly quelled by Rael's stern voice ordering them to move on. Off to the side, Ray drags a small figure behind her, seemingly out of place in his harsh world. With silent reproach, he leads the fragile youth by the hand, encouraging his tired body with the promise of quick shelter. The path runs along winding trails, through dense greenery, hiding unknown dangers. In the distance, the outlines of a village whose peace will soon be disturbed can be seen, and behind it, indignant voices. Within the walls of the fortress, Rael is greeted with obvious disapproval, and his decision to bring an outsider is harshly criticized. But Rael, without flinching, turns the conversation to more pressing threats lurking behind the walls. Elderkar's menacing voice interrupts him, brushing off his warnings and indignant at his insolence. His gaze is full of anger. Every word is a reproach for trying to undermine his power. Rael stands firm, accusing Carr of selfishness hidden under the guise of caring for the village. Lancia suddenly appears, her quiet voice addressed to Carr, interrupting the heated argument. It is Lancia, and her majestic appearance seems to cool the ardor, and her words protect Rael. She explains her arrival, and in her voice one can hear concern mixed with a slight reproach towards her father. A subdued dialogue between Rael and Lancia confirms the stranger's presence, and a hidden question is visible in her gaze. She wisely suggests that the elder meet the stranger himself to make an informed decision. The creaking of the door breaks the solemn silence, foreshadowing a quick meeting. Measured footsteps echo down the hallway, and Lancia's eyes widen in genuine surprise. Stunned, she feels the blood rush to her face, unable to tear her eyes away. Before her appears Rai Wei, whose appearance carries something ancient and powerful that instantly attracts attention. Lancia stutters, trying to defend Rael, but her voice trembles from the shock of Rei's appearance. Meanwhile, long before that fateful moment when Rei appeared, tension reigned in the village caused by the appearance of a stranger. The elder thought about his son, Keith, who led the guard, and whether the stranger was being too brazen. His young grandson reminded them of the sacred day when they were to meet the god Kermark and offer him prayers. The old man shuddered, realizing how quickly the hours were flying by, bringing the moment of their fateful journey closer. Having urged his father on, the young man hurried to prepare for the journey, leaving the elder one alone with his worries and thoughts. And Kate, in turn, felt an unusual relief after the meeting, which went much more smoothly than he was used to. However, despite his outward calm, there was a wariness in his eyes, calling for extreme caution. Thoughts about the stranger occupied him. Since he had settled here, he would probably stay, becoming part of their village. Keith noticed how carefree and joyful the young villager was in the presence of the stranger, not feeling any danger from him. And the young boy, unaware of the hidden threat, smiled sincerely, admitting that this was the first time he had met such an unusual person. Keith patted him gently on the head, giving orders to the guards to rest, while he himself prepared for the last important tour of the village. Soon he and his 3 companions, with a determined step, entered the gates to begin the night watch, called upon to protect their peace. From a bird's-eye view, the silhouettes of the guards could be seen, listening attentively to Keith's stern instructions about the need for increased vigilance on this dangerous night. One of them, embarrassed, apologized for being tired, but Keith reminded him of his duty to the village and that he could not afford to be inactive in the face of a threat. Suddenly, Lancia appeared in Keith's path, and he, surprised by her appearance, asked about the purpose of her visit, to which she stated her desire to meet the stranger. Her gaze was direct and demanding as she pressed her point, asking Keith a question about his future plans. Lancia reminded them of the holy hour when everyone should offer prayers to Kermark, but Keith interrupted her, telling them of a gruesome discovery, the corpse and tracks of a powerful monster. He explained that it was precisely at such moments, when the outside world threatened, that their true duty was to vigilantly guard the borders, rather than to follow their usual routine. Her voice rang with indignation as she again appealed to the sanctity of the rituals. But Keith, unwavering, defended his duty, insisting that the god Kermark would not approve of inaction. Anger shot through Lancia, her body shaking as she stubbornly demanded that these 3 guards be the ones to go with her, ignoring the claims of holy protection for the path. Lancia, as if accepting the inevitable, meekly stated that if she was not destined to receive an audience, she would simply continue on her way, though there was an underlying determination in her words. Her gaze, saturated with secret desire, slid to the side, revealing her true intentions behind the mask of submissiveness. And Rai, without saying a word, only watched this unpredictable woman intently, his scarlet eyes concealing deep thoughtfulness. Lancia soon left them, leaving behind only the echo of her footsteps and a sense of impending intrigue. A sinister smile twisted her lips as she decided, either out loud or in her mind, that she no longer needed Kate, and now her gaze was fixed on another, more desirable man. The little companion, worried, warned Rai of the mortal danger posed by the woman who had left them, persistently begging him to stay away from her. Time passed as usual, and the ringing of bells echoed across the world, measuring out every moment. Suddenly the boy cried out, realizing that time had inexorably expired, and, bowing low, asked for just a minute's delay. Silently, with an expression of deep submission, the boy bowed his head, and Rai only watched attentively, without revealing his thoughts. Far from the hustle and bustle, at the foot of an ancient castle, a procession of people in white robes hurried, trying to circle the mountain before nightfall. Inside one of the carriages, Lancia and Kate sat in prayerful silence as their companions offered their prayers with concentration. Meanwhile, Rael, driven by some unknown force, stubbornly climbed the slope of the hill, his determined gaze directed into the distance. The surrounding nature was majestic, with mountains and dense forests rising under a serene sky, testifying to the ancient power of these lands. The creaking of the wheels mingled with the springy steps, indicating a continuous movement, persistently moving forward through the wilderness. Soon the procession stopped at the foot of the cliff, and a master of ceremonies ordered everyone to wait there, to which they immediately and meekly agreed. Kate and Lancia led the group, their faces serious and determined as they prepared for the next stage of the journey. Step by step, they sank into the shadow-shrouded crevice, where every sound of their steps seemed to echo in the silent stone labyrinth. With their hands folded in a gesture of prayer, they humbly called out to Lord Kermark, declaring themselves his lowly servants who had come to appear before him. A figure dressed in mysterious robes emerged from the darkness and gently motioned for them to raise their heads, accepting their thanks with a subtle dignity. A commanding voice announced that they had been expected and the time had come to fulfill the ancient promise, causing Keith and Lancia to shudder with anticipation and surprise. Yes, the mysterious figure acknowledged that circumstances had slowed them down, but promised to prioritize the care of his loyal servants. Kate and Lancia flinched as the Lord spoke of the lives of the villagers, awe evident in their eyes. As a reward for their faithful service, they were promised eternal life, the fulfillment of a long-held hope. Tears streamed down Keith's face, and Lancia bowed her head and whispered words of deep gratitude. Meanwhile, the ruler savored in his thoughts the acquired power, the accumulated strength that would soon allow him to enslave entire cities. With a commanding gesture, he sent Keith and Lancia back to the village, ordering them to prepare and await his arrival, to which they humbly agreed. Keith, his gaze sharpening, reminded Lancia that some of the priests had shown disrespect and might interfere. She, in turn, clarified that the priests were doomed anyway, their fate was predetermined. The mysterious figure responded with a sinister chuckle, agreeing to grant them this honor of being the first. From a bird's-eye view, a view opened up of the entrance to the cave, where 3 priests waited humbly, unaware of their approaching fate. A sudden sound caught the attention of one of the priests, his gaze darting towards the source of the noise. With swords at the ready, the guards demanded that the stranger stop, threatening to attack. Their faces showed determination, but sparks of anxiety flickered in their eyes. However, the Lord, stepping out of the shadows, only sneered at their insolence. With flowing blonde hair and scarlet eyes, the Lord appeared in all his arrogance, looking down on the pathetic little people. An ominous light flashed in his scarlet eyes, foreshadowing imminent reprisal. An invisible force struck the guards, causing them to stagger and scream in surprise. They tried to move, but their bodies did not obey, bound by invisible shackles. Dark tendrils of energy erupted from beneath his cloak, entangling the helpless guards, frozen in terror. "What is this?" Horror pierced their voices as they struggled to pronounce the name of their tormentor, the Lord. A sinister grin played across his lips as he addressed the shackled guards, whose faces reflected mortal terror. Their silent call, their panic, all this was only the beginning of his cruel game, where fear served as fuel. He spread his arms, proclaiming himself their god, by his name Kermark, asserting absolute power over their destinies. Doubt and shock mixed on their faces when they heard that name, the name of their Lord, spoken with such arrogance. But their questions were answered only by darkness. Sharp tentacles, bursting from his clothes, mercilessly squeezed their bodies. Horrific screams rent the night air as the tentacles began to devour their life force, turning the men into twisted husks. "It's an honor," the impostor cried out madly, absorbing their souls, their lives, growing stronger with every groan. And while this nightmare was unfolding in the night, somewhere in the distance, under the gentle daytime sky, the blonde was strolling carefree away from the castle. His peace was disturbed by 2 guards hurrying past, barely noticing him in the pre-dawn silence. Upon learning that they had been called away by Lady Lancia to announce Lord Kermark's message, the blonde felt a slight sense of unease. Thoughts about the missing guards sent with Lancia tormented him, strengthening his premonition of disaster and breaking his usual picture of the world. Time passed, and with each strike of the tower clock the anxiety grew, drowning out the jubilation of the approaching day. A huge crowd had gathered in the square in front of the castle, their faces glowing with anticipation, but a coldness was growing in his heart. Among them, he noticed little Uni, who had also come to listen to the important news, and called her over. The news of Lord Kermark's impending message excited everyone, but in his soul, it echoed with a strange dissonance. Lancia solemnly announced that Lord Kermark, delighted by their devotion, would grant them his favor. And as a reward, he himself will deign to descend into their village that night to accept their worship. The crowd's delight was enormous. They rejoiced, preparing for the holy day, unaware of the true price of this mercy. The residents, intoxicated by promises, rushed to prepare the village for the arrival of their god, anticipating the great event. But little Uni, as if sensing something was wrong, froze, her childish face distorted by an inexplicable fear. "I'm very scared, as if something terrible is approaching and we are all in danger." Kate leads a frightened Uni away from the cheering crowd, seeking privacy. At home, Uni shares her growing horror, sensing the imminent disaster that gnaws at her childish heart. Her fear was rooted in the enigmatic looks of Carr and Lancia, and was especially heightened by the mention of Lord Kermark. Uni's anxiety made Keith wonder if Lancia and Carr were hiding something sinister. Kate suggests getting Rai out of the village immediately, sensing that danger is near. But Rai is bound by Lancia's orders and is not destined to leave the village, which only deepens Uni's anxiety. Finally, Kate reluctantly agrees, and a glimmer of hope crosses Uni's face. In a loud voice, Kate declares, "Something terrible is coming to the village, you must run." Kate decides to personally scout out the situation, instructing Uni to get ready for departure. Meanwhile, the villagers are hard at work building something, a sacred place for the coming Great Kermark. In the distance, Kate meets Lancia, whose smile hides more than just a greeting. She insistently reminds us of the importance of unquestioning obedience to her orders today. Lancia orders the patrols to be cancelled and forbids anyone from leaving the village until Lord Kermark arrives. Kate, interrupting her, tries to ask her question about the missing guards. "Where are the guards you sent yesterday, and where are the rest of the priests?" he asks, sensing a catch. Lancia replies that they have been tasked with an important mission to escort Lord Kermark, but Kate doubts her words. There is a cold interest in Lancia's eyes as she asks about his motives and purpose for these questions. As Lancia approaches, she whispers that this day is significant because Lord Kermark himself will come to them in the flesh. Their gazes meet, full of mistrust and hidden intentions, the air charged with tension. Kate turns away abruptly, choosing to walk away, leaving Lancia with her secrets. A cold voice barked out an order, demanding complete expulsion as the fallen guard lay motionless on the ground. Above the scene of chaos, Kate, Rai, and Yuna felt an inexplicable sense of unease despite the expected arrival of Lord Kermark. Kate reveals a disturbing truth to Rai and Yuna. The guards and priests who accompanied Lancia have disappeared without a trace. Lancia's words about accompanying Lord Kermark to the village sounded suspicious, and Keith couldn't suppress his growing distrust. Kate gives Yuna some advice, offering to escort the stranger to the eastern city, promising to return when everything is settled. Yuna and Rai exchange silent glances, full of hidden questions and concerns. With paternal concern, Kate thanks Yuna for her understanding, and Rai silently accepts their fate. In a parting gesture, Kate hands them a bag of food, providing them with what they need for the journey ahead. But Kate calls out to Rai again, wanting to tell him something important before they part. With a piercing plea, Kate entrusts Rai with the most precious thing, to take care of Yuna, despite their differences in understanding. With ominous blows echoing, Kate hurries them away, realizing there is no time left. Meanwhile, in anticipation of Lord Kermark's arrival, the city's inhabitants gather at the gates, preparing for a solemn prayer. High on the wall of the city fortress, a lone torch flares up, like a harbinger of things to come. The square in front of the gates fills with people, each of whom stands with bated breath, accompanied by mysterious blows. A hand is raised into the air, calling everyone to prayer as the moment for the great ritual arrives. In a single impulse, the worshippers turn to the great Kermark, expressing their devotion and impatience. As the prayers reach their peak, an ominous purple glow begins to emerge from the ground, causing slight confusion. A mysterious energy envelops the crowd, and horror appears on people's faces as they realize what is happening. Lancia, her face twisted into a sinister grin, triumphantly says, "Finally," as horror grips the innocent. Suddenly, everyone around him weakens and falls to their knees. Keith feels a paralysis grip his body, foreshadowing total defeat. Meanwhile, the three figures standing to the side exchange words. Lancia confirms that everything is ready, and her accomplices welcome the arriving Lord Kermark. Lord Kermark himself, with cold majesty, looks around at those around him, noting their numbers, while one of the captives is struck by his appearance far from divine. The overlord appeals to his loyal servants, promising them eternal life as a reward for their diligence, which causes alarm and questions among those not privy to this sinister deal. But the true price of this eternity is revealed instantly when Kermark, with a creepy grin, announces his thirst for blood. His gaze becomes sinister, and the words spoken with a treacherous smile make the blood run cold. He wants the blood of his own followers. At that very moment, dark tentacles burst out from under the ground, wrapping themselves around the bodies of the unfortunate, depriving them of the ability to resist and condemning them to a painful death. Kermark enjoys the spectacle, knowing that the blood of these victims will make him even more powerful, bringing him closer to his cherished goal, world domination. Helpless cries for help are heard towards Lancia, but she only responds with icy calm, cynically declaring that this is merely the fulfillment of the will of the great Kermark, who seeks to rule the world. With a cruel grin, Lancia asks a terrified Keith if it's not a blessing for such pathetic villagers to become fuel for the Lord's ambitions. The deceived people, realizing the full horror of betrayal, call out to Lancia and her accomplice, demanding an answer as to why they were used. But Lancia only mocks them, claiming that she never lied, because she simply did not clarify all the details of their service. She cynically explains that she only kept silent about the fact that they would have to sacrifice their lives so that she and Carr could achieve the immortality they desired. The enraged man, realizing the monstrous truth, starts screaming, calling Lancia a witch, but his words are immediately drowned out by new dark ribbons. He is completely entangled, his screams are frozen in his throat, and his body writhes in agony from the merciless grip. Then his body erupts in an ominous glow, and a terrible scream echoes through the crowd, foreshadowing the fate awaiting everyone else. Lancia respectfully thanks Kermark, who merely waves her hand, saying that he simply couldn't stand the annoying whining. Kermark calmly explains that they all face the same fate, to be drunk dry, and this man simply happens to be the first to suffer this terrible fate, plunging Keith into a state of chilling horror. While the unfortunate writhe in agony, slowly dying, an exhausted hand clutches the hilt of a sword, and a blue magical glow flares up around them. Lancia and Carr are shocked. Lord Kermark looks at Keith in bewilderment, who, despite the paralysis that has gripped him, manages to stand up, challenging them and accusing them of monstrous greed. Kermark, intrigued by the unexpected resistance, wonders about its usefulness, but Kate, gathering her last strength, declares them monsters and rushes into battle, vowing to stop this madness. As if on a last glimmer of hope, Kate takes a desperate leap, throwing herself straight into the epicenter of danger. His blade cuts through the air, aiming for the heart of the one he branded a monster, while smaller creatures swarm at his feet. But Kermark's return gaze flashes with an ominous light, foreshadowing inevitable retribution. And now Keith, immobilized by an invisible force, collapses to the ground, his daring attempt in vain. Kermark's retinue rains blows and insults upon the defeated Keith, trying to suppress his will. Lancia intervenes, stopping his father, while Kermark himself, maintaining an icy calm, assesses the situation. He then turns to Keith, acknowledging his exceptionality and offering him a grace worthy of his unique abilities. Lord Kermark offers him salvation and a place by his side, but the price is complete submission. However, Keith's determined gaze rejects such a deal, preferring death to dishonor. Carr, not one to tolerate disobedience, tries to grab him again, but Kate slips out of his grasp. Suddenly, Lancia reaches out and saves Keith, pulling him out of the trap and giving him a chance to escape. They run away, disappearing into the night, their footsteps echoing across the ground, carrying them away from their pursuers. Away from the fray, Rai apologizes for his haste, understanding his little companion's confusion. The boy explains that a mysterious premonition forced them to act, but Rai only listens silently. Suddenly, Rai freezes, his gaze fixed on something in the distance, causing the boy to stop in surprise. Ignoring his companion's bewilderment, Rai says that they need to hurry, although he himself does not move from the spot. His eyes are fixed on the village, from where an ominous crimson light comes, piercing the darkness of the night. Rai tells the boy something important, explains the way, and, feeling his duty, decides to return to the burning village. Leaving the boy alone, Rai quickly runs back, with a heavy heart wishing for him to find a companion in this dangerous world. Meanwhile, in the village, the villagers scream in pain, their strength being absorbed by a terrifying purple energy that drains the life from them. A wounded Carr begs Lancia to stop, but she only sneers coldly, calling the lives of villagers insignificant in the face of immortality. The dark walls of the fortress loom over the world, a silent witness to the impending chaos. Little Uni runs desperately into the distance, his steps echoing loudly through the empty streets among the ruins. The red glow evokes a chilling horror in him, and with each passing second he feels a stronger premonition of the tragedy that has befallen the inhabitants. Uni's eyes are wide open, full of incomprehension and a silent question frozen in them. Agony and death. Dozens of bodies lie on the ground, their faces distorted with horror, and Uni realizes that something irreparable has happened. The boy's heart is squeezed with pain and despair. His mind refuses to believe what he sees. Suddenly, a light rustling sound is heard nearby, and someone appears from the darkness. Uni falls to the ground in fear as Lancia appears before him, her cold greeting only causing him to tremble even more. With a false smile, she offers to call her sister as Uni tries to comprehend the horrific fate of the villagers. Against the backdrop of lifeless bodies, Lancia utters cynical words about great honor, plunging the boy into shock and bewilderment. Her sinister smile and words about sacrificing for Kermark, which includes their lives, cause unimaginable horror in Uni. As Lancia reaches out to Uni to take him, Carr's desperate cry of death is heard. Lancia mockingly forgives Uni for her escape attempt, while a wounded Carr, overcoming the pain, begs her to leave the child alone. Carr, bleeding, screams furiously, forbidding anyone to touch Uni, and Lancia, intrigued by his power, only wants him more. His insolent gaze at Kermark incurs the wrath of his minions, who brutally attack him, not allowing him to even look at their master. Merciless blows rain down on Carr, and all he hears are furious cries wishing him a quick death. One of the men, watching the torture, asks for it to stop, and Carr, half-conscious, asks him a bitter question about betrayal. Lancia laughs at the word monster, but Carr, despite the pain, continues to shout that Kermark is not God, but a monster, for which he receives more blows. Little Uni, in tears, cries out to Lancia, begging him to stop the violence, while his father tries to calm the crying child without stopping the beating. The beating turns into agony, and the already wounded Carr receives further blows, while his tormentor declares that he wants to finish off that bastard himself. But then Kermark's commanding voice is heard, ordering the merciless beating to stop. His calculating gaze falls on the tortured Carr, and Kermark pronounces him too useful to die, planning to drink his blood alive. While one of the servants obediently agrees to Kermark's will, little Uni, driven mad by what he saw, screams his father's name. Carr falls to his knees, bleeding, and the last spark of hope fades from his eyes. He clings to consciousness with all his might, repeating that he must protect their village. But his courage fades, replaced by a feeling of guilt towards his son, whom he can no longer protect. Uni's tears flow like a river, and his childish mind cannot comprehend the reason for such cruelty and his own helplessness. In desperation, he cries out for help, his cry carrying across the earth, but remains unheard. The boy begs for mercy, his small fists clenched in silent prayer. At this critical moment, when hope seemed to have died, the mysterious Rey appears, his appearance causing shock and bewilderment in Uni. With a serious expression, Rey orders them to leave, warning them of the danger. Turning away from the boy, he moves towards Kermark, his determination unassailable. Lancia, clearly intrigued by Rey's appearance, turns to Kermark with an unexpected request to give her this man. After a brief moment of consideration, Kermark agrees, and Lancia thanks him, her smile taking on a sinister quality. She leans towards Rai, haughtily declaring that she saved his life and demands his gratitude. A predatory fire lights up in her eyes, and she whispers that he belongs to her now. But Rai only coldly utters one word, ordering her to move away. Ignoring her attempts, he passes by, and Lancia, amazed by his strength, freezes in place. Surprise turns to panic when she realizes she can't move, and her voice refuses to obey. Lord Kermark's evil laughter cuts through the silence, and his words finish Lancia off, confirming Ray's indifference. Kermark's icy gaze promises only death, passing final judgment on the stranger. But something else flashes in Ray's red eyes, a premonition or a hidden ancient power. Suddenly, Lord Kermark freezes, picking up the subtlest, most disturbing vibrations. His sharp gaze narrows as he asks a question that could change the course of their battle. Kermark smirks smugly, recognizing Ray's true nature, but still confident in his own unshakable strength. He tries to bend Ray to his will, ordering him to bow down. But Ray, with incomprehensible calm, only throws out a short, sobering word. Shock contorts Kermark's face as Ray dismisses his arrogance with contempt. At that very moment, a powerful blow shakes the air, tearing apart the space around. Lord Kermark falls to his knees, broken, his former arrogance shattered. The terrible truth pierces Kermark's consciousness. Ray has absolute control over his mind. Fear grips everyone around as the villagers and Lancia stare in shock at the fallen lord. Kermark desperately tries to resist, but his mind is paralyzed and his words lose all meaning. A terrible guess flashes through the lord's mind about the noble's involvement with this stranger. Yet, even defeated, Kermark finds the strength to challenge, refusing to give up without a fight. In desperation, he unleashes his power on the innocent, shrouding them in darkness to distract them. Screams of pain echo throughout the area as his twisted power takes over everyone around him. With a mad laugh, Kermark reveals the true source of his power, but Ray is already preparing for a crushing blow. Kermark flies back, crashing into the castle wall, and in his rage, he delivers a contemptuous monologue, and Ray, for the first time, seems surprised by his words. Ray's powerful blow explodes from its place, cutting through the night sky with a blinding beam. Kermark takes the blow, and the earth trembles under the onslaught of the power released. But a furious rage flashes in the enemy's eyes. His face is distorted with anger from the unexpected rebuff. He refuses to give up, stretching out his hand and gathering his own dark energy for retribution. With a contemptuous smirk, he seemed to push back Ray's attack, demonstrating his steadfastness. And now, Ray himself is thrown back by the shockwave, his body flying over the destroyed landscape. A powerful explosion shakes the ancient walls of the castle, where the defeated Rai crashes into it with crushing force. In the distance, someone's feet cling to the ground, trying to maintain balance after such a powerful shock. Under the cover of night, a growing anxiety grips all the witnesses. Erga and Lord stand frozen in tense anticipation. A little boy screams in despair, trying to wake up his injured friend. Relieved that his friend was still breathing, the boy tried to help him. But the fight is not over. A new rumble spreads throughout the area, foreshadowing a continuation of the battle. Rai, despite his wounds, rises to his feet, his gaze fixed on Kermark, who stands in the distance. Kermark, confused by Rai's power, demands answers, not understanding where his opponent got such power. In the tense silence, Rai remains silent, meeting Kermark's angry gaze. It doesn't matter though, Kermark grins, his plan clearly involving something even more sinister. With a maniacal smile, Kermark takes out a blood-red artifact, preparing to use it in battle. The memories are cut off, he hears a voice promising incredible power for human blood, explaining the nature of the shard in his body. With glee, Kermark recognizes the item as the Bloodstone, the key to unlocking his true potential. Now, Kermark understands that the entire stone would have given him unlimited power, but required gradual development through the absorption of blood. A hooded voice whispers a dark promise: "Drink the blood of mortals and gather strength, and none can stop you." Without thinking, Kermark plunges the bloodstone straight into his chest, feeling a sharp but welcome pain. Kermark's body writhes, engulfed in magical energy, and, in this chaos, the figure of Rai appears in the distance, his gaze full of anxiety. Unholy power erupts from his new body, shaking the earth and rushing towards the ancient walls of the castle. From the clouds of smoke, something nightmarish emerges, the gigantic demon Kermark, whose roar shakes the night itself. An all-consuming power fills him to the brim, and Kermark, mad with ecstasy, realizes his new, terrifying essence. With a wild laugh, he rushes into battle, crushing everything in his path, asserting his undeniable invincibility over the crowds of mortals. Its paw, like a deadly hammer, descends on helpless victims, tearing them to shreds. Intoxicated by blood, Kermark decides that the blood of this opponent, who possesses at least some power, will be much more valuable than the blood of ordinary people. With a deafening roar, he crashes into the walls of the castle, turning them into ruins, not noticing the obstacles in his path. Rage overwhelms Kermark, but his new power is too wild to be fully controlled, and his victim vanishes without a trace. Suddenly, Wei appears before the rising vortex of energy, calm and unwavering. Wei's gaze, cold and determined, meets the demon's astonishment, foreshadowing an inevitable clash. With incredible ease, with a single movement of his hand, Wei stops the furious flow of blood emanating from Kermark. Bray's counterattack sends the demon flying backwards, causing him to slam into the rock, leaving dents. An enraged Kermark, unaccustomed to resistance, curses as he prepares to attack again. The demon rushes towards Rai, his fury shaking the earth, crushing the stones under his feet. Kermark, confident in his invincibility, deals a crushing blow, but Rai only extends his hand, preparing for a new confrontation. Bewilderment and anger distort the demon's features. Even the strongest leaders could not so easily repel his blows. But Wei, without flinching, prepares for the next attack, his composure only intensifying Kermark's rage. A powerful blow from the demon shakes the very foundations of the destroyed village. But even this power is not enough to crush Wei, and Kermark, seething with rage, realizes his vulnerability. He cannot lose, not after all the sacrifices, and Kermark's gaze falls on his last followers. Mercilessly, he stretches out his dark threads, capturing them while they are still trying to understand what is happening. Their cries of betrayal and broken promises are drowned out by his insatiable thirst for power, their lives becoming mere fuel. An insatiable power takes hold of him, and now the next victim is in his deadly grip. A child's cry of despair echoes across the devastated land as Kermark mercilessly pulls another innocent child towards him. The dark threads of his essence entangle new victims, depriving them of any hope of salvation. But then Wei stands in Kermark's way again, his hand extended forward, his gaze cold and determined. Hatred and rage flare up again in the demon's red eyes. This man continues to stand in his way. And then Kermark decides to take extreme measures, releasing all his hidden power. His body pulses with dark energy, preparing for another destructive blow. But something happens. His own power turns against him. Kermark's body can't withstand the monstrous strain. He roars in pain and rage. His flesh tears. His muscles swell to unimaginable proportions. Bones break, and new, grotesque limbs burst through the skin, changing the demon's appearance. The monstrous transformation is complete. Kermark has become a multi-armed creature of pure fury. A clot of dark energy erupts from its open mouth, threatening to engulf everything in its path. This is not just an attack, it is a wave of destruction aimed directly at the defenseless village. Rai, shielding the child, watches helplessly as the impact crashes down on the houses, turning them into rubble. The demon triumphs, his mad cry echoing across the dying land, proclaiming victory. An ancient evil has risen, wrapping its bloody tentacles around the world, causing panic among doomed souls. A dull rumble shakes the earth, echoing from the massive walls of the impregnable castle. A child's cry breaks the silence, its innocent pain reflected in the cold night sky. Through the pain, a certain hero extends his hand, trying to stop the inevitable, but the demon's power only grows, and his gigantic form, like a creature of nightmare, bursts out of the darkness. A tear of blood rolls down the cheek, testifying to the great sacrifice and boundless despair. A hellish roar echoes through the night, heralding final devastation. Fully manifested, the winged demon hovers over the world, its appearance terrible and majestic. From his many hands burst forth clots of flame, ready to devour all living things. A deadly hail falls from the sky, every drop a promise of imminent death. Blood streams down the defender's face, and a child nearby screams, realizing the full horror of what is happening. In desperation, he raises his arms, trying to shield the little life from the falling darkness with his body. The man's gaze, full of pain and determination, meets the furious grin of the monster. But then a counterblow comes out of the darkness, powerful and deadly, aimed at the very heart of evil. The demon, sensing an attack, freezes for a moment, spreading its wings. Black lightning pierces the skies, leaving behind only devastation and a trail of fury. A deafening explosion shakes the world, tearing apart the night darkness. The castle stands firm, but at its foot, Rai falls to his knees, hugging his child, surrounded by smoldering coals. A silent question was frozen in the child's wide-open blue eyes, and the world around him still breathed death. Red lights, like ominous eyes, flicker in the night sky, reminding us of the past battle and its inexorable end. The red lights, which flickered like ominous eyes in the night sky, made the child whisper, "Red snow?" But suddenly, as if by some invisible force, the flesh on the arm trembled and the wounds began to heal, leaving only crimson marks. Every deep cut disappears as if it had never been, and death itself retreats before this miracle of healing. Slowly, with a painful sigh, one of the fallen comes to his senses, opening his eyes full of shock and confusion. What happened? "We were dead," a whisper rolled across the ground, awakening others who had lain lifeless just a moment ago. All around, one after another, people were returning to life, their consciousness confused in a whirlwind of questions and disbelief at what was happening. The child, noticing a familiar figure turning away, hurried after her, as if trying to grasp the only thread of hope. "Wait!" A desperate cry pursued the retreating Rai, whose dark shadow was already merging with the approaching night. "Who are you?" The question, full of naive hope, hung in the cold air while Rai seemed to pay no attention to it. Rai's gaze slid into the distance, his red eyes reflecting the echoes of the past storm, remaining impenetrable to those around him. His calm hid an ancient strength, and his face showed a centuries-old weariness, hidden behind a mask of indifference to everything. Meanwhile, the child, left alone with this mystery, set out again on his journey through the deserted, ruined streets. Fear and loneliness weighed heavily on fragile shoulders as eyes searched for any sign of hope in the pitch darkness. Far away, within the walls of the majestic castle, the commanding voice of the Lord was heard, breaking the silence. "Razel, have you fulfilled my order?" Young Rael, with dark hair hiding part of her face, bowed respectfully before her master, expressing her readiness. "Oh, really?" the Lord said with a slight grin, making it clear that the discussion of details could wait and dismissing her. "Go and rest." And while Rael was leaving, only the Lord remained in the empty hall, and then an elderly companion approached him.